I want to start today with a little picture. I think it's going to feel, well, uncomfortably familiar to a lot of us.
Okay.
So you had a long week, you're tired, you're in line at the grocery store, and the person in front of you is, I don't know, counting out pennies.
Oh, I've been there.
Or you're in traffic, someone cuts you off, and,
Oh.
and suddenly you feel that heat, you know, in your chest. You're angry, you're impatient, but then almost right away, a second voice kicks in.
Ah, yes, the internal critic.
Exactly. The voice that says, hey, you meditate, you listen to podcasts about mindfulness.
You own crystals.
You own crystals. You shouldn't be feeling this. You tell yourself you need to be more zen.
To vibrate higher.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And because you aren't currently floating on a cloud of unconditional love, you feel like a failure, like you're just bad at being a spiritual person.
It's the Zen trap. It's this incredibly pervasive idea that, spiritual maturity looks like a flat line of constant serenity.
Right.
And if you have a pulse or a reaction or just a bad mood, you've somehow fallen off the wagon.
That is exactly what we are dismantling today. We are doing a deep dive into a fascinating stack of research, all centered around a guide titled Soul and Sanity, the Integration of Spiritual Health.
And I have to say, the sanity part of that title is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
It really is. The central premise here is it's radical because it challenges that Zen trap directly. It argues that true spiritual growth isn't about escaping your humanity or your emotions. It's about inhabiting them completely.
That distinction right there, inhabiting versus escaping, that is the entire ballgame.
Yeah.
The mission of Soul Insanity is to prove that spirituality and emotional avoidance are often used as synonyms, but they're actually opposites.
Opposites.
We're going to explore why emotional honesty, really rigid boundaries, and yes, even professional mental health support are obstacles to spiritual life. They're actually critical infrastructure for it.
I love that phrase, critical infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
because usually we treat our spiritual life and our mental health like they're two different departments in a company that never, ever talk.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with definitions. The source material draws a really hard line between true and false spirituality. And I think for a lot of us, false spirituality is what we're scrolling past on Instagram every day.
Oh, for sure. The beige aesthetic, the perfect yoga poses, the good vibes only captions.
Exactly.
The source calls this the aesthetic of avoidance. It's so easy to mistake the appearance of health, being calm, being quiet, for actual internal health.
Right.
But Soul and Sanity makes a critical distinction here. It says that if your version of spirituality requires you to suppress everything that isn't love and light, you aren't cultivating a spirit.
Yeah.
You're cultivating a persona. You're just acting.
Wow. That hits hard. So if I'm stuffing down my anger or my anxiety just to maintain this image of being a conscious person, I'm basically just performing.
You're performing, but more dangerously, you're disconnecting. The analysis in the text points out that emotionally healthy spirituality allows for the full spectrum of human experience.
The full spectrum.
It isn't about subtraction, getting rid of the bad feelings. It's about capacity. Can you hold grief? Can you hold rage? Can you hold fear? The source says healthy spirituality makes space for contradiction.
So you can feel two things at once.
Yes, you can be deeply grateful for your life and incredibly furious about a specific situation at the exact same time.
See, that feels so contradictory to how we're usually taught, or at least how pop culture spirituality is sold to us.
Mm-hmm.
We're told that anger is a low vibration, that if I'm angry, I'm disconnected from the source or God or the universe, so I try to get rid of it.
And that is where Soul and Sanity completely flips the script. It introduces a concept that I think is the key to this whole deep dive: emotions as data.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because usually I view my emotions as like problems to solve, not data.
Well, think of it like a dashboard in a car. If a light blinks on, you don't smash the dashboard to make it stop, right? You look at what it's telling you.
Okay.
The source argues that emotions aren't moral failings, they are information packets. For example, take rage. We usually demonize rage. But the source asks, what is the data inside of rage?
I guess. It's telling me I don't like what's happening.
Usually it's even more specific than that. Rage is almost always data that a boundary has been crossed. It's a protection mechanism. It's your psyche saying, violation, pay attention.
Whoa.
Now, if you suppress that rage because you think it's unspiritual, you miss the signal that you're being mistreated. You basically turn off the alarm system.
That is a huge shift. And what about anxiety? Because that's the one I think people feel the most shame about.
Anxiety is often data that a core value is at risk, or maybe that you don't feel safe in your environment. The shift the source encourages is moving from suppressing the emotion to responding to the information.
They're responding.
A spiritually healthy person notices the emotion without judgment. They don't say, I'm bad for feeling this. They act like a scientist. They observe it. They ask, what is this telling me about my environment or my needs?
There's a quote from the text that I highlighted like 3 times. If a practice discourages you from feeling or questioning, it is not spiritually supportive. It is restrictive.
That's it right there.
It really leads us into the darker side of this whole good vibes culture. There's a term in the research that I think we need to really nail down because I hear it used loosely, but the clinical definition is so important. Spiritual bypassing.
This is a massive concept. It was originally coined by the psychologist John Wellwood. It describes the tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, unfinished developmental tasks, all the hard stuff.
So it's basically using God as a shield against going to therapy.
Essentially, yes. It's using transcendence as a defense mechanism. Instead of doing the heavy lifting of processing trauma or dealing with a difficult relationship, you just say, I'm rising above it. You detach before you've actually dealt with anything.
The source gives some brutal examples of this. And I say brutal because I have absolutely said these things to people thinking I was being helpful.
We all have.
The first one is that classic phrase, everything happens for a reason.
Oof, yeah. We've all heard it, and we've all likely said it. And look, in retrospect, finding meaning in suffering is a beautiful, necessary thing.
Of course.
But Soul Insanity warns that when you use that phrase immediately after a tragedy, either to yourself or someone else, it's bypassing. It's a way to rush through the pain. It's saying, don't feel the loss, just find the lesson.
It invalidates the grief. It's like saying the pain isn't real because there's some plan. It just silences the person who is suffering.
Exactly. It shortcuts the grieving process. Another big form of bypassing the source highlights is forcing forgiveness.
Oh, this one is huge. The idea that if you don't forgive someone right away, you're carrying toxic energy or, blocking your blessings.
That is weaponized spirituality. The source emphasizes that forgiveness is a complex internal process. It's often the last step of healing, not the first.
The last step.
If you force yourself to forgive an abuser before you've actually processed the anger and established safety, you aren't being spiritual. You're just engaging in repression with a spiritual sticker on it. You're essentially gaslighting yourself into thinking you're okay when you aren't.
That is such a crucial distinction. Forgiveness is a result, not a requirement. And then there's the positivity trap. Blaming negative emotions on a low vibration.
This is maybe the most insidious one because it introduces shame into the whole equation.
Yeah.
If you're depressed or struggling with chronic pain and someone tells you it's because your frequency is low, the subtext is, this is your fault.
It sounds like victim blaming.
It is victim blaming, just wrapped in New Age language. It suggests you just aren't thinking positive enough. And the source is very clear. This creates isolation. If you can't share your pain because it's seen as bad energy, you end up suffering alone.
Which is the opposite of connection.
And true spirituality should never result in isolation. It allows for discomfort. It doesn't rush you to the finish line.
This brings us to a really significant intersection in this deep dive, the relationship between mental health and faith. Because if we're being honest, there is still a stigma. I've heard people say that if you need an antidepressant, it means you aren't praying enough.
Or that therapy means you don't trust the universe.
Exactly.
Well, Soul Insanity tackles this head on. This is the sanity part of the title. It asserts that therapy, medication, support systems, they are not failures of faith. They are not signs of spiritual weakness.
I think for a lot of listeners, that's going to be hard to internalize.
Yeah.
We want the spiritual practice to be the cure-all. We want meditation to fix the chemical imbalance so we don't have to deal with the medical system.
But that's a category error. The source argues that healthy spirituality respects neurodiversity and trauma responses. I mean, think about it this way. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't tell someone to just meditate on the bone knitting and refuse a cast.
No, of course not.
You would go to a doctor, get the cast, do the physical therapy, and maybe you'd also pray for healing or meditate to manage the pain.
Right. You do both. One doesn't cancel out the other.
The source argues mental health deserves the exact same respect as physical health. Your brain chemistry isn't a moral failing. A panic attack is not a lack of faith. It's a physiological event. It's adrenaline and cortisol.
So spirituality and mental health care are companions then? Not competitors. They're on the same team.
Exactly. And this leads to the danger zone the text warns about. If a spiritual teacher or a religious leader tells you to stop taking your medication and just chant or pray instead, that is a massive red flag.
It's malpractice.
It is. It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
Healthy spirituality implies that the divine, however you define it, works through professionals, through science, through medicine. It doesn't require you to reject reality to prove your devotion.
Okay, so we've established that avoiding emotions is bad, bypassing is a trap, and therapy is good. But let's get practical. What does integrated spiritual health actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon when everything's going wrong?
Right.
The source transitions into tools, and the first big bucket is regulation.
Regulation. It sounds clinical, but the source frames it as deeply spiritual. Here's the logic. If your nervous system is constantly in fight or flight, you literally cannot access the prefrontal cortex.
The thinking part of your brain.
Right, the part responsible for compassion, connection, patience, or presence.
You're just in survival mode.
Yeah.
You can't be zen if your body thinks it's being chased by a tiger.
Precisely. So the source argues that nervous system regulation is a spiritual practice because it creates the physical conditions for spiritual connection.
So what are the tools here? Are we talking about like hours of meditation?
Yeah.
Because I don't have hours.
No, and that's the key. The source suggests micro practices. Breathwork is the fastest way to hack the nervous system. Grounding exercises, like just feeling your feet on the floor.
I like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique they mention. Identifying 5 things you see, 4 you can touch.
Yeah, it's about getting back into your body. The source also uses the term mindful movement. It's not about doing a perfect yoga pose for Instagram. It's about shaking your hands or stretching or just walking to discharge that survival energy.
Okay, so it's a toolkit for staying present.
Yes. But here is the surprise twist in the source material. They list one more tool as a primary spiritual practice that most people never associate with spirituality. In fact, most people think it's unspiritual.
Boundaries.
Boundaries.
I have to admit, this is a real aha moment for me, reading the notes. I usually associate being spiritual with being open, endless giving, being the yes person.
Always available.
And the source says that's actually a recipe for spiritual disaster.
It creates spiritual burnout. The source argues that setting boundaries is one of the most emotionally and spiritually healthy things you can possibly do.
Okay, why? How is saying no a spiritual act?
Because it protects your capacity to love. Think about it. If you say yes when you mean no, if you help someone when you're already depleted, what happens?
You get resentful. You start rolling your eyes when they text you.
Exactly. Resentment is the silent killer of connection. You start secretly hating the person you're helping. You become passive-aggressive. By setting a boundary, you are clarifying self-respect. You are saying, I value this relationship enough to be honest about my limits so I can show up fully when I am here.
Spirituality should strengthen boundaries, not dissolve them. That's a direct quote from the source that I think completely changes the paradigm.
It's so crucial. You are not required to merge with everyone and everything to be spiritual. You are allowed to be a distinct person. You are allowed to protect your peace.
This connects so directly to the section on self-compassion. The source talks about the arrival point myth, this idea that if we just do enough yoga, we will eventually arrive at a state of perfection where we never get triggered again.
It's the perfectionist's fantasy, and soul insanity just tears it down. There is no arrival point. You don't win spirituality.
You don't win.
The text argues that emotionally healthy spirituality accepts mistakes. It allows for rest. It assumes you will mess up, lose your temper, and have bad days.
So the goal isn't to become a robot. The goal is to be a human who is kind to themselves when they trip.
The growth equation here is, growth happens through gentleness, not pressure. If you are beating yourself up for not being spiritual enough, you are activating that stress response all over again. You're making it harder to grow. Kindness calms the system. It creates the conditions for change.
The source also talks about community. And I think this is huge because often spiritual journeys are framed as this solitary thing, the hermit on the mountain. But the source warns against isolation.
Isolation is often mistaken for spiritual maturity, but it's usually just a defense mechanism. Healthy spirituality values honest conversation and shared humanity. It opposes secrecy.
Secrecy is the big one.
Right. If you feel like you have to hide your struggles to fit into your spiritual community, if you can't say, I'm really depressed today without being judged, that is not a healthy community. Growth happens in connection.
Yeah.
In the messy middle of relationships, not just in silence on a cushion.
Speaking of bad communities, the source actually provides a checklist of red flags. These are warning signs that your spiritual practice or the group you're in might actually be hurting you. I want to run through these quickly because they are so practical.
Let's do it.
Number 1, feeling guilty for emotions.
Oof. Yeah. If your practice makes you feel shame every time you feel sad, angry, or anxious, that's a control mechanism, not a growth mechanism.
Number 2, avoiding real-life responsibilities.
Oh, this one. If your spirituality is just an excuse to check out of your job or ignore your bills because they're too 3D, that's just avoidance. Grounded spirituality helps you live in the world, not flee from it.
Replacing care with belief. We touched on this, the anti-medicine stance.
Major red flag, it puts lives at risk.
And this one, feeling pressured to heal faster.
This is so subtle but damaging. Healing has its own timeline. It's non-linear. Any group or teacher pushing you to get over it on a schedule is not prioritizing your well-being. They're prioritizing their own comfort.
They just want you fixed so they don't have to deal with your pain.
Exactly.
And finally, fear of questioning teachings.
This is the hallmark of a high-control group. True spirituality is robust. It can handle your questions. It can handle your doubt. If questioning is forbidden, you are in a cage, not a sanctuary.
That list really empowers you to just trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is.
And it brings us right back to that core theme we started with, integration. The source ends with this beautiful sentiment that true spirituality is not about transcending humanity. It's about inhabiting it fully.
Yeah.
It grounds you in reality. It honors the complexity of being a person who has a soul and a nervous system and a job and trauma.
But it creates this image of spirituality as a companion.
Yeah.
It walks with you. It doesn't just fix you.
Exactly. When spirituality supports emotional truth and mental health, it becomes a source of strength, not a source of pressure. It stops being another thing on your to-do list, be spiritual, and starts being the way you navigate the list.
There are some affirmations at the end of the source material that I think we just need to read out loud. They hit so hard. You do not need to be healed to be spiritual. You do not need to be calm to be worthy. You do not need to be perfect to be whole.
You do not need to be calm to be worthy. That one line just completely dismantles the performance. It gives you permission to be messy.
To be a work in progress.
And it reframes the struggle itself.
Yeah.
The source ends by saying, healing is not spiritual failure. It is spiritual practice. The struggle is the path. The mess is the material.
Wow.
You aren't failing because it's hard. It's hard because you're doing the real work.
That's a massive shift. It means my road rage isn't a failure. It's an opportunity to practice regulation. My sadness isn't a failure. It's an opportunity for self-compassion. So here is where we leave you to think. We've talked a lot about bypassing, about using positivity as a shield. I want you to look at your own life for a second. Where are you using positivity or Zen to avoid facing a necessary, difficult truth? Is there a conversation you're avoiding, a boundary you're scared to set because it feels unloving, or a pain you're refusing to feel because you think it lowers your vibration?
That's a really question.
Because if today taught us anything, it's that facing that truth, wading into that mess, isn't a detour from your spiritual path. It is the path. Thanks for diving in with us.